Hi folks, you're on Radio FM 88 Australia. We're broadcasting from Springwood, Queensland, Australia. And currently in our studios here in Springwood, we have my mate, living the life of luxury.
I know, look at this.
It's really exciting.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
What are you ringing? You're coming in from Aspen, Colorado, eh? One of those bloody fantastic places. Anyway, so in our travels, we happened to be in Bribey Island some 6 weeks ago, was it? And we come across this world traveller. That's the best way to say it. Yeah. And so as a result, we've actually asked Melanie to come in and give her the opportunity to give us all a brief about taking a step out and living life. But like Julia Roberts in the movie Eat, Pray and Love. Is that right? Eat, love, pray. Eat, pray, love, pray, eat, love. Anyway, it's all happening. So welcome, and I'll pass you on to Julia.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dreaming the New Dream. Yes, we're delighted that you can join us and that we have Melanie Kay, originally hailing from San Francisco. Melanie is a Crystalline Grid Mechanic, originally a family therapist by training. Was doing the commute, going into town, etc., and being told to pretend she wasn't doing the spiritual stuff. And she said, "Nope, I'm not going to pretend I'm mainstream," and dedicated herself to that and set off in 2018. Left San Francisco and has a passion for bringing starseeds, lightworkers, and magical beings together amongst earth, plants, animals, minerals, and spirit energies for the service of Gaia and her ascension. Now, you don't often meet someone who is full-time in this line of work. And somehow Gaia's sort of swung her across to Uluru and then to Bribey. So we're actually probably going to go backwards with Melanie and find out sort of like, welcome to Brisbane, and what on earth got you to Uluru?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I was actually telling a couple women today, as I was telling my story again, I was telling them how Uluru was the last chakra of the earth that I ended up landing on. So there's a theory out there that there's these chakras of the earth, and there's these major vortexes where the big dragon lines or the big song lines or the big ley lines move through. There's a beautiful website about that. Go just look into chakras of the earth, and I'm sure it'll come up for you. But you'll see how those ley lines travel through the earth, and they intersect at different points, and then they cross through different vortexes. And Uluru is one of them. It's a solar plexus chakra of the planet. Now, I ended up, it was actually in my heart that I wanted to do that work. But it wasn't until I set out in traveling that I realized I was actually going to accomplish that mission. And Uluru was my final destination. And that's where I landed before COVID happened. And so now I thought I was going to be leading tours at these sacred centers of the planet. And I thought I was going to be doing these sacred earth activation tours at these chakra points of the planet. But actually, when I landed in Uluru, right when the COVID came through in March 2020, they were like, no, you're going to stay in Australia. So here I am.
Hey, what do you call a crystalline grid worker then? What's that?
Yeah, crystalline grid work. I mean, so that's kind of what I'm talking about. There's actually a beautiful organic design of ley lines and energy pathways on the planet. And just like our body has all these meridians, so would be the earth, because we are a macrocosm or a microcosm of the macrocosm. So as we have this in our body, and it's been studied and it's been proven through a lot of traditional Chinese medicine and other practices, the earth has these meridians and ley lines as well. And if you're sensitive enough in your physical body and being, and you're sensitive enough with your connection to the planet, you can feel these energy currents and they're also known as telluric currents. They're like magnetic resonances and rivers that run through the earth. And if you are sensitive enough to pick that up, you can actually feel how they're flowing or not flowing in any particular area, wherever you are. I think it's even interesting on my ride down here. I haven't taken the tram since I've been in Australia. I haven't taken a TransLink or a bus, and I did this whole journey to get down here, and just riding these certain pathways that are already, designed by nature, but then we actually respond to it by designing pathways of movement through roads and trams and whatnot. You can actually feel where things are open, where things are closed, where things are blocked or congested. And so that's something that I'm attentive and aware to. And on my earth walk, I'm helping to maybe just witness that and somehow help navigate that or unbind some of the energies that may be stuck.
Right.
That's beautiful. I mean, I think, scientists have proven, we all know that birds navigate with along magnetic ley lines, and that they've got crystals in their brains, and humans do as well. But how did you develop your ability to feel these toroidal currents?
Great question. I was actually thinking about that today because I had a sense that you were going to ask that question. And I was really thinking back to when was the first time I was called to really be with the land in a way that made any kind of difference, where I really knew I was there and I made a difference. And it was actually in response to, I was living in San Francisco, and there were so many healers and different people that were doing, they were doing like hoop play. There's a whole range of people doing a lot of different healing modalities over there. And there's some people that have decided to rename themselves. And I think you probably have this trend as well in Australia where people name themselves Shakti, circumference, or, Rama, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of people that have renamed themselves. It's not their original name, but they claim to be their spiritual names. And I'm kind of making jest of it right now. But at the time I was like, I don't want to just rename myself from my brain. I actually want I want my spiritual name. And I know that I have one that's not the name that I was birthed of. And so I asked for that. I was, at that time remembering my connection with crystals, and I was remembering my connection to doing ceremony work. And I was doing that in little tiny ways, just burning incense, just getting crystals that I felt intuitively called to, just, working with cards and that kind of thing. And then I really asked for my spiritual name. And it took about 9 months. I was very impatient, but I had to forget about it. I had to forget about me asking. And then I got this major dream. It was a very lucid dream. It came in, and it was telling me about these three little bears, Iti, Ishe, Ute.
Oh.
And that's where, I think you have that in my bio, right? I put it in my bio,
Mm-hmm.
Iti, Ishe, Ute. And I woke up remembering it so clearly. I wrote it all down. I knew it was three little bears. And when I looked more closely into these names, E.T., I think I found somehow when I was looking through that pathway meant truth. And then Ishe, a totally different culture, meant community and harmony in community. And then Ute actually is a Northern American Indian tribe, or they call it the Ute Indian tribe. Right. And their totem was bear totem. And that really resonated with me. And so I started looking up their territory and where they had their place. And there was a park there called Dinosaur National Monument. And I was like, I know I need to go there. I just knew. I intuitively knew I needed to go there. And so I made a week-long trip without any plans to go to Dinosaur National Monument. And I went. And I surrendered myself to the unknown, which at that time, learning how to do this is actually not easy. To learn how to drop yourself into the unknown so deeply, where you really are I'm not going to actually make a pathway and a route to where I'm going. I'm going to let spirit guide me on the road as I'm driving to turn here and turn there. So like that's literally how I let it be. I had I was riddled with doubt, riddled with confusion, riddled with the unknown. And I ended up going down into this point in Dinosaur National Monument where there's this whole river that turns into a couple of different rivers. And I felt like I got there and I just needed to sleep. And I slept. I was just like, okay, I'm just going to pass out. I'm just going to sleep. I'm going to just do what needs to be done. And after that, I drove this whole pathway, not knowing. And I got to the end of this kind of ridge that I was traveling along, just so confused, like, what are you doing? You're a crazy person. That's really what I was telling myself inside. And there was a sign on the side of the road. So I pulled off and I looked, and it was actually that I had just traveled the Ute Indian migration pathway.
Wow.
Yeah. From Dinosaur National Monument all the way up through this ridge. They traveled that back and forth from spring to summer or from winter to summer. Because of the elevation and because of the different landscape, that was their pathway every single year. And I traveled it through my subconscious. So that was something that just absolutely anchored in the truth of what this is, to follow your intuition and actually to do this work. And later, when I was getting a ride to the airport from my friend, his friend's sister gave me a ride, and she had this pack of cards in her glove box. I don't know why. I just looked in her glove box, but there was this pack of cards from Dinosaur National Monument. And the place that I had done the energy work was actually at this river crossing that was on the ace of I don't remember what suit it was, but it was on the ace of card, and it said the history of it on the back, and it actually spoke about there being a big protest there. They were going to dam that whole river, and because of the protest they didn't. So I think there was an energy that was the message to me, that I had cleared this conflict energy that was there with this there were not only Indians there, but it was in the 70s, and there were protesters there as well as people that really wanted to capitalize on that river system.
Is this in Alberta, Canada?
No, that was in Dinosaur National Monument, right in the border of Colorado and Utah.
Oh, yeah.
So that was when I really first knew, like, okay, there's something about this land work, and then I found some mentors to help put a little bit of framework around it. Started to become more conscious, so I didn't have to go to these places and just fall asleep. I could actually be conscious and sit and meditate and actually let the energy come through me. But yeah, that's just how it arose naturally.
So when you sit and meditate in a space that you've arrived at, and I can really resonate with what you're saying, because I've had the same thing where I'm driving back from the bush, and I've let my daughter navigate, and not really worried about where we're going. And then for some reason, I get this magnetic pull, like I've actually got to stop and touch the land and connect to it. And I suspect that was more of a past life, but it was very physical and tangible. And equally, I know that certainly people always get drawn to places that actually have the energy that is also good for them, or which needs to be fixed. So I can understand that. But when you say you sit there and meditate and you just let the energy flow through you, are you connecting with a certain, with Gaia, or with a certain planetary or source energy? Which energy are you kind of being a channel for?
Thanks. That's a great question. Well, now that I have a little bit more structure to the work that I do, if I go to a certain place, I have a little bit of a plan and program, but it's open and it's loose. So first I'll create the sacred space. So, if I bring crystals with me, or if I bring offerings with me, or all of the above, candles, incense, these kind of things, if I bring all that stuff with me, then I'll create that space that I'm going to sit and do some work. If I didn't bring that stuff with me and I'm just feeling called, oftentimes I'll actually gather some kind of things from the area around me and create something that actually, sets the space. So I think that's important. And then from there, just calling in protection, asking for protection, whatever source of protection you feel resonant with. There's different like dimensional layers of protection as I've learned through the steps. So I have my protectors, and I have beings that offer that. So I call those in, and then I'll call in the directions. It's really important, I think. And I call in all 7 directions. Some people call in the 4 directions. Some people call in, what I learned from being in, with elders in North America and South America is that, North America, the 4 directions are so important. In South America, they call the lower, the upper and the middle. And I think when you combine them all, you really get the whole full picture. So it's, northeast, southwest, below, above, and center.
Yeah. So
right.
You then get a diamond structure, and like in Chinese we have the 5 elements, but then we have the center, and then the one that mediates between north and south. So yeah, it absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
Right. So I'll call in the directions just to get, again, like just to honor that and all the elements that'll go along with those different directions, which is different for different cultures. So I go based on the ones that I know and that I feel resonant with. And then I call in the guides and masters that I feel are supporting this ceremony in that moment. So I don't call in the same beings, each time. It's actually the beings that come that want to support that work that I'm doing in that here and now in that space. So, in Australia, gosh, I've learned about like a whole nother pantheon of gods and, and ethereal beings that are here. Like the Aboriginal elders, the spirit gods here are so different than like just go, you go up to India or you go up to Nepal and it's like a whole different story. You go to North America, it's a whole different story. So you have to actually just listen and really feel like, okay, who's supporting? And you have all the different classes. You have the elementals, you have the archangels, you have, the galactics, you have, the beings that are our ancestors on the land. So you have to listen and kind of see who wants to be present for the ceremony, call those guys in. And then for me, it's like, okay, I sit, maybe a song comes through, maybe a dance comes through, maybe a movement wants to happen. And maybe I'm just still and I'm just channeling light. And that's kind of what happens. It's a really simple, and then I have some kind of closure and some kind of, I love to give little offerings to the elementals and offerings to the beings that helped out. And that might be flowers. It might just be like even just from the local area, little nuts and seeds or, just little things you give as an offering of thanks and gratitude. That's usually how I close things out.
Yeah, it's lovely. As I'm listening to you talk, I'm reminded 2 things of different cultures that I've seen that, carry with them that sort of respect and acknowledgement of land spirits or the elementals. One was, reading Khalil Gibran,
the prophet,
the story of the prophet, and the master shaman or magician, whatever, before he went to a town, he would actually ask whether he had permission before he would enter there from the sort of the elders and the spirits. And the other was just going to Bali the first time, and the little ceremonies they do in the morning, sort of straight. I don't know whether it's before breakfast or after breakfast, but as part of breakfast somehow, just gathering the flowers that have fallen from the tree, putting them on a little dish, and then going out to the garden to, the local spirit there and just putting it there and kind of giving thanks. And just what a beautiful way of acknowledging and being with and being there. And that's what for you, it seems to be intent and being of service. And just tapping into the power of now and, whoever.
I'm listening. Listening is so huge, because you're right. Like sometimes there are sites that you actually, I kind of feel in my physical body, but there's so many different ways of perceiving those other dimensions, right? So some people see it, some people hear it, some people feel it, some people just intuitively know it. But I know when I'm walking into a space and there needs to be an acknowledgement of like an ask. There needs to be an ask, like, do I have permission? For example, going into the water hole at Uluru. It's clear to me, like I walk and I can feel the barrier there of the gate. and there's no gate, there's no physical gate there, but I can feel the energetic gate where I'm like, oh, do I have permission to enter and be in this space? And you ask, and it's like, they feel your intent and your clarity, and it's like 100% yes, but the listening, the deep listening that's required to walk that way, that's important. I think that's what's important.
So where did you learn the deep listening?
I think practicing this ceremony work, I think practicing this land ceremony work, because I did the work of spending the time in the unknown, the not knowing, and that's the scariest part of this kind of development of self, right? If you're willing to actually put yourself out, I think the biggest growth I've ever had in this way of being is putting myself into a situation where I'm by myself with the land, and I don't have an agenda, and I have a certain period of time that has to be filled somehow, and I don't know how I'm going to fill that time. And so that just inherently leads to listening. It inherently leads to tell me what I'm supposed to do, because I don't have the plan. Right. So yeah, it's I put myself into those positions or those situations, and in the Native American tradition, they call it vision quest. I just call it journeying. Like it's you set up a certain time frame. You say, I'm not going to have a plan for this time frame. I'm going to spend this much time out in this environment, and I'm going to do what feels organically right to do, and I'm going to listen. But yeah, I don't think there's any kind of other training that's more profound than doing that. It's just challenging. I think people are scared to go those places. But I have a million stories of those kind of things that I've done. I could tell you about a healing journey that I had in Mount Shasta. I mean, I spent so much. I spent so much time in Mount Shasta is my etheric home. It really is that's where my soul feels like the most home on the planet. That place. I mean, I told you a story. I told you a story, Julia, about how I got kicked out of a sound healing retreat, didn't I? Did I tell you this story?
Not quite this,
so right at the end of my training as a psychotherapist, I thought I'd treat myself, and I had never done anything like this. I just thought I'd never spent that much money. It was over $1,000, which was huge for me for a week of learning this tuning forks. Right. And sound healing. And I was just oh, this is going to be fabulous. It was going to happen in the Puget Sound in Washington. There's a whole, this whole area of islands, and it's called the Puget Sound. So I thought, oh, sound healing in the Puget Sound. And it was advertised at this, New Living Expo. And I had my heart set on it. So I went for it. And I just finished my master's in psychotherapy and was training to become a psychotherapist. And I get there, and these women, and I'm reading Lynn Andrews. Do you know Lynn Andrews, Julia?
Yeah.
Okay, so Lynn Andrews is an author. She wrote a book called Star Woman and Jaguar Woman. And anyway, she was one of the first kind of white women to be taken in and nurtured and nourished by these Native American elders. And then she wrote about it. And so it actually became popularized, I don't know, maybe in the 90s or something. I was reading this book at the time, and it was just this weird thing where the book and my journey were kind of coalescing and really in sync with one another. Woodby Island is where this retreat was in the Puget Sound. So I go, and I'm going to learn us tuning forks. I'm so excited. I was just enthralled. So I get there, and this woman is so disorganized. The retreat leader, she's Canadian. She's super disorganized. She has 5 people that she already knows have been part of her posse in Canada with her. And this woman's cooking. She hasn't even bought any of the groceries. We were supposed to have dinner at a certain time. That wasn't happening. We were supposed to do intentions in the ceremonial way that evening. That wasn't happening. And she was like, listen, I've been called by spirit to just allow the schedule to unfold as it's happening. And, we don't need any kind of structure. And at that time I was just like, are you kidding me? You can't charge this much money and also like be the spiritual leader and also say like, we don't have any schedule whatsoever. Like, we're just going to go based off your flow. Like, what about the group flow? I was just so confused. So I didn't get it. I started asking her questions, and then she started to do this like gaslighting with the woman when we did the intention talk. And I was like, I started asking questions about that, but I was still in the very deep, like innocence, childlike state of being where I was like, I don't understand. And I didn't realize that like little by little, my questions were triggering her and making her angry and more angry and more angry. So by the time I was like, not gonna succumb to her like underhanded power grabbing, and she realized that, she kicked me out of the retreat like the next morning. And we're on this island in the Puget Sound. We had taken a ferry over. We were supposed to be there for a week. I was just like, what am I going to do? I spent all this money. So I immediately asked her, like, how can I, like, what are we going to do financially? And she wasn't going to give me my money back. Oh. And I was just like, I was feeling like, how do I navigate this? Like, do I fall into the victim? I'm not going to do that. My intention of going to that retreat was to find my seat, because I was becoming a therapist, right? So I needed to find my seat and find my grounding. And so that was my intent. And she was doing everything to pull me out of my seat, and I wasn't budging. So she kicked me out. And they actually did this whole thing. And she got her crew of people to believe that I was this like evil influence on the retreat. She actually used like, little hand gestures to almost like I was some kind of evil spirit that she needed to cast out. She was doing like Reiki symbols in my face to like cast me out, like I was an evil spirit. I was so traumatizing. But honestly, she got the whole group to ceremonially drum me out. She asked me if I needed help. I said no, and I'm walking up this long driveway, like not knowing what I'm going to do. And I'm laughing because of the situation. I mean, it could have been like a whole skit on Saturday Night Live, right? Like I was just really aware that this could be like a full-on comedy situation. And I was crying. And I was laughing. So I walked out of there. And luckily enough, I had engaged with another woman on Whidbey who was running programs. And I said to her, I would love to spend some time with her. So I told her after the retreat, I would come see her, and I told her what happened. So she had a place for me to stay. I stay there. I'm just in a mess, but I found this amazing deal on a rental car, and I got the rental car for a week and just decided to do my own journey. And that was probably one of the beginning places that I started doing this journey work. So I just decided to just go where I wanted to go. And I ended up going to Mount Rainier. I ended up doing a little dedication and the earth ceremony there. And for Mount Rainier in Washington, which is this beautiful mountain at the top of the Cascade Range, I start weaving down, and I go through Oregon, and I get all the way down to Mount Shasta over, the course of a few days. And when I walked into Mount Shasta, I walked into this beautiful crystal shop, and I told the woman that was there in Mount Shasta about what had happened with this woman, and that I decided to do this journey through Mount Rainier all the way down and winding through the Cascades down to Shasta. And she said, "You just traveled the blue streak." And she goes, "Here." She gives me a Mayan calendar. And from there, I don't know why she gave me that. She's like, "You should start tracking this because you just traveled the blue streak." I didn't know what she meant. I just knew that whole journey was so magical. And I actually did feel like I found my seat. I found my cradle. And then she gave me my calendar. So I started tracking it. Yeah. And I still track the Mayan calendar. It's actually, this beautiful way that I feel like I've been able to build up synchronicity with natural time. That was one thing actually I did want to share in this talk is that one of the quickest ways I think we can actually achieve more synchronicity and more flow with natural rhythms and natural time is by tracking sacred time. And the easiest is through this Mayan calendar. I mean, it's a 13 moon, 28-day calendar. If you take 28 days and times it by 13, it's 364. So that's one day off from the solar cycle. Why we don't have that as our monthly cycle, I don't understand. The Gregorian calendar is made up by a pope in the 16th century that decided they wanted to synchronize the pagan calendar with the Judea and Christian holidays. And so that's why we are tracking that, but it doesn't have anything to do with natural time.
So the Mayan calendar and your trip down Mount Shasta, where would that fit into the calendar? Where you like, is it like there's a sudden change in season and you were in sync with that, or?
I think that the woman that I met, well, first of all, she's the keeper of the 13th crystal skulls. That's first of all.
Okay, we know that.
That's a whole nother story, but she's the keeper of the 13th crystal skull, and she on the 21st of the 12th, on 2012, she brought that skull up to the top of Mount Shasta, and what she would say would be to actually birth the child's heart of humanity. That's what the big initiation that happened at the end of the Mayan calendar and the beginning of the new cycle, the new big cycle. She would say that was about birthing the child's heart in humanity. And I think there was a big activation for a lot of people in 2012, during that activation and that period of transition.
Let's just pause there. Jeff, you brought up a picture of Mount Shasta from the top. It's actually quite interesting. I haven't seen this one. And what are those are just pins.
Looks like Shastina. So Shastina and Shasta are the two highest points on this volcanic mountain. But the whole, this is one of the mountains, but it's at the base of the Cascade Range that goes all the way up to Mount Rainier. But Mount Shasta itself is considered the root chakra of the planet.
Okay.
And it's such a powerful place. I mean, since I've been going up there, I think my sensitivity has grown. But I used to feel the mountain about 20 minutes before getting to it. Like I used to get excited. And, the last time I was there, I could feel it all the way like an hour before getting there. I could feel myself my heart getting excited. Yeah. Because, so Mount Shasta is a place where the crystal from Atlantis is etherically placed. So there were 7 crystalline temples in Atlantis. And when Atlantis fell, the higher level beings of it that were, kind of witnessing and overviewing that whole system and period of light, I'll call it, like that era of light, they actually etherically moved those powered crystals to different places. So there's 3 that are triangulating the contiguous quartz mine of Arkansas. That's the second largest contiguous quartz mine, is in Arkansas, the United States. And there's 3 that are surrounding the contiguous quartz mine in Brazil, which is the first largest contiguous quartz mine in Minas Gerais. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But the crystal, the 7th temple crystal, is etherically placed in Mount Shasta. And because I've remembered past lives in Atlantis, and maybe because I have that deep soul connection with that time, I know it, I feel it, I get it. Like I don't know, I just get excited when I head to that. I recognize. Yeah, I recognize it. And I recognize those crystals. I mean, anybody who's like a crystal person will know that those crystals that come from Brazil and Minas Gerais, and those crystals that come from Arkansas are the highest frequency, quartz crystals. Besides the Himalayan, I mean, you got your Himalayan quartz is also going to be super high vibe because it's right there by Mount Kailash. Mount Kailash is the crown chakra of the planet.
I've got a mate there's gone up there a few times tramping there, but the last time we went 3 years ago, he wasn't allowed to actually go into the national park.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
I finished that circumambulation of Mount Kailash on my 39th birthday. Oh, it was so beautiful. And then going down to that lake. Oh, it was just my heart. I feel like Kuan Yin and Tara and there were so many beings that were present as I was doing that circumambulation. I put 21 crystals that I received from Egypt around that mountain.
Oh.
Yeah.
You walk around it, did you?
I did. Took 3 days. It's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
So high. The elevation is so high. And I just, like the first day is the hardest day. You have to climb the highest, and it's the highest elevation. You get to this tea house, and you're literally passing all these Nepalese people and all these Tibetan people that do this like yearly. They do it yearly, and they're doing it in prayer for the compassion of humanity. And some of them are doing it in frustration.
Oh,
Yeah.
this
Oh, yeah.
Chakra.
Amazing. Yeah.
And it takes 3 months to do that. And they're doing this for the salvation of humanity. And you cannot understand until you do that walk what that actually really means until you see these people doing this, these elders doing this, and these children doing this. It's like, the people in Beverly Hills have no idea that the people in Tibet are praying for them. You know what I mean? Like, people on the street that are wrapped up in some kind of substance have no idea that there's a whole group of people praying for them. And it just blew my mind. It brought me to I just broke down.
Let's get it up.
And you brought crystals from Egypt to Tibet.
Well,
Tell us about
yeah.
How did you get the crystals in Egypt? Just try to write Mount Shasta.
Okay,
Egypt.
good. All right,
What's
so
the order? What's the
right,
order?
so I was in Egypt. So when I was in Egypt, we were out. I don't even know how to go in those stories. When I left San Francisco, I ended up in India. It was one of my little dreams to just go and be in an ashram in India and learn about yoga. I'd been a dancer all my life. I learned a lot about movement. I'd been doing yoga a long time. I thought, why not get a yoga certificate? So I had met one of these, Yogrishi Vishvakhetu, beautiful, beautiful teacher, has an ashram in Rishikesh, and a friend of mine had gotten certified. I said, yeah, this is perfect. So I went. That was kind of like my ground base after leaving San Francisco. I was like, I'll just ground, do this month-long thing here. Well, during that time, I was just dreaming about Mount Kailash. I just thought, like, oh, I have to get there. How am I going to get there? I just didn't even remember that it was a thing. And then I was there at the ashram, and I was dreaming about it and waking up like, I know that mountain. How do I know that mountain? Where is that mountain? I must be close. I could feel it. And I found that I was pretty close. So I booked a ticket after the ashram to go to Kathmandu. I thought that was what I was supposed to do. So I go to Kathmandu just to research, how can I get to Mount Kailash? Well, it wasn't time, and it wasn't the right scenario. And literally I would have pushed it. Whatever happened, it felt like I got a wrench put in my hip. After doing a month of yoga and being like super limber and super healthy, I couldn't walk. I couldn't even walk through Kathmandu.
Right.
So I was like, what am I supposed to do?
You're being the spanner in the works, literally.
Yeah, that's it. And this woman that I had met in India and I couldn't stop running into, this woman is Egyptian American. Her name is Rhonda, beautiful woman. And she basically we just were running into each other in Rishikesh. It's not that common to like run into somebody over and over again. So we ran into each other. By the 5th or 6th time we ran into each other in town, I was like, Rhonda, we need to go sit and have tea. What's happening here? And she was headed to Egypt to visit family and to be there as an adult for the first time. And she goes, you should join me. I was like, you're kidding me. I had no idea. In my heart, I was like, there's no way I'm getting Egypt this soon in my life. For me, I thought Egypt was like really far away, right? So I was like, there's no way. It can't be that easy, right? So I go to Kathmandu and I'm struggling with my hip. And she calls me and she goes, what are you doing? Why are you in Egypt with me? And I was like, okay, I'm coming. So I get to Egypt and sure enough, my hip thing resolves itself immediately. And she says to me, oh, meet me in Cairo. And immediately when I get there, she's like, oh, actually, my uncle sent me down the Nile on this boat. So just go to this place. So I was on my own in Cairo and I start exploring and navigating. And she connected with me with a few people. So I got to just feel like I was being held. And I met this beautiful tour guide and went on tour in the pyramids. And when we went down into Luxor, I think it was Luxor, they take you to what is it called? They mine the alabaster there, right? And they create all these beautiful alabaster vases and figurines, and they take you through these little shops, but they give you a demonstration of how they polish and how they shape the alabaster. And it's like a form of calcite, right? So it's like almost like an optical calcite. So they show this demonstration and these guys are drumming, and I'm a dancer and I'm kind of a little wild child. So I just started moving and this guy was like, here, do the thing, which is like this little drill. And so I'm dancing and doing the drill and I'm just making like a little bit of a spectacle, but just having fun, just kind of being a clown. And I go into the shop and I come out and this old guy, this elder comes to me with a huge smile on his face. He didn't speak any English, just spoke Arabic and dropped this whole handful of crystals in my palm. Wow. And 5 scarabs.
And 5 scarabs?
Yeah, these 5 scarabs and 21 these pieces of this alabaster calcite, optical calcite, and just nods at me and says, shukra, shukra, like, thank you. And I just was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And of course, the group that I was with, they're like, whoa, they couldn't believe that I just like got this gift from this elder. So I honored that. I mean, I have a scarab tattooed on my wrist and
yeah, show us.
Yeah, I'll show you. Oops, can I see? I can't quite twist it the right way. There it is. It's like a very primitive style scarab, but that was actually from a full moon eclipse ceremony that I did on the top of Mount Shasta. My mom was always into scarabs. My grandma was always into scarabs,
really?
And
that's pretty unusual.
Yeah, and I feel like my mom's a Scorpio. I'm 4 times over Scorpio. I have 4 planets in Scorpio, and so we always talk about the underworld stuff. And I just got that put on my wrist, and so he gives me 5 scarabs and these crystals, and 21 is special to me because I was always into tarot, and in the tarot, the major arcana is 21 cards, and that's the Ascension journey to me.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
So the major arcana is actually the Ascension path encoded in symbol and story. So I thought it was just so profound that he gave me these 21 crystals, and then the 5, which is actually my soul path number and numerology, my birth date and my name, both equal 5 if you add it all up. So
you were exactly where you needed to be.
I was
that dance. It was Gaia sang, the stars. Gaia whispered, the stars sang, and Melanie danced.
The stars sang, and I danced. Yeah, and then I just carried them around with me. I don't know. I just didn't feel like they were supposed to leave. And then when we got to Mount Kailash, I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do with these stones. That's the other thing. It's like the listening, right? And the somebody could have been like, I don't want to let these go because they were given to me and they're special and it's from Egypt. And But I knew when I got there, I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do with these stones.
Yeah, and that's the gifts that you get through Gaia, isn't it? The shamans do that as well. They're walking and they pick up the feather and then they add value to it. But then they let it go when they feel. And crystals apparently do that, don't they? They sort of are pretty vocal about when they arrive and then they depart, whether you like it or not, right?
That's true. That's true. And they tell you where they want to go and who they want to go to. I mean, I give crystals away to almost everybody on my journey. You know, it's pretty rare that if you meet me and spend any kind of significant time. In fact, I have a crystal for you, Julia. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty rare that like I meet somebody and I don't have that kind of offering for them, or the crystals don't say, why don't you let me go with her? Or why don't you let me go with him? Because I just keep collecting anyways. So I have this beautiful traveling altar that I take around with me, and it's grown now that I've been in Australia for almost, over a year now. I've been here since March 2020. So staying in one place actually lends itself to collecting more things. It's going to be really weird when they have to move again, when they have to move around again.
So from Egypt, did you go back to Nepal then, or what was the next call?
Okay, so Egypt, I went into Europe, I went into Greece, and I did all the activations there, all the different temples there. There's a whole series of temples around Greece, around Athens, that make a real amazing pentagram, kind of protective shape. And there's so much connection there. Obviously, the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians had a huge relationship just being across the Mediterranean.
So it's a bit love-hate, actually.
But I don't know. Yeah, maybe. But, who knows? Because it was a long time ago. And then, oh my gosh, I got pulled to Jordan, right? So this woman that I actually met in Egypt invited me to go to Jordan. And again, another like unbelievable synchronicity, unplanned synchronicities. Of course, that's an oxymoron. You can't have a planned synchronicity. But I was in Greece for the Orthodox Easter, which doesn't mean a lot to me because I don't consider myself a Christian. I consider myself spiritual, but I understand religion, right? So I was there for the Orthodox Easter, and what I didn't know was that they actually take a flame from Jerusalem and fly it in to the churches in Athens. So on Saturday night at midnight, they light up all these candles and they fireworks in the sky and like celebrate the resurrection, of Jesus. I didn't know this. And so I actually had a really hard time the couple days before I was going to Jordan, which I was leaving to Jordan on Monday, the day after that Orthodox Easter. And I was literally felt like I was dying in my Airbnb. I don't know. I couldn't get myself to move. All I wanted to do was go get wine at the corner store and just drown myself in my sorrows. And really, I was just feeling sorry for myself for no reason. I felt like I was dying.
Could you absorb the energies around you?
I guess. I mean, and then I had perfect clarity at about 5 to midnight. I just got out of bed and I was like, what are you doing? Get outside, get some fresh air, move your body. And then these fireworks went off. And then I realized, oh my God, it's Orthodox Easter. I think I just had a resurrection moment. I think I had a Christ on the cross, a resurrection moment. I think I was actually like somehow psychically, somatically experiencing that, whatever. So then on Monday, I go flying to Jordan. I met this beautiful Australian couple that were part of the military defense, and they were learning Arabic in Jordan, and they were in Egypt just for vacation. So they invited me to come and stay with them in Jordan. I get to Amman, and that night they're like, do you want to go to Jerusalem tomorrow? And I said, what are you talking about? They're like, well, our defense attaché owes us a trip to Jerusalem, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind taking you with us since you just arrived. So that morning, we get up in the morning, and I am in a military convoy to go to Jerusalem, an Australian military convoy. I'm an American in an Australian military convoy going to Jerusalem. And we get through the whole border checks. He beelines us straight to the Holy City and straight to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I could not make this stuff up. Like, it's just 2 days after that whole resurrection experience, I'm in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Yeah. And just like feeling the energies there.
What was it like there?
Oh, I mean, that whole, what I really noticed about that, because I'm tuned into the earth there, right? So it's not just the church. And that was spectacular, by the way, that photo that you have up right now. That whole thing is so spectacular. But that's been built on and built on and built on for centuries, right? The actual place that Jesus was buried was a cave, underneath all of this now that's built up. So what I realized is that land is supercharged because Jerusalem and the whole Dead Sea and everything is because there's two plates pulling away from each other. It's a huge, what do you call that? A rift zone where two tectonic plates are pulling away from each other. So there's literally deeper earth energy coming up the crack of those two tectonic plates, and it's enriching the water, and it's enriching the earth, and it's enriching the energy. And that land has been fought over for centuries. It's still being fought over. And I guarantee you it's because the energy on the land has nothing to do with the religions. It's because of the power center that it is.
I reckon you're right. What do you reckon, Jeff?
Felt right.
Yeah.
People don't realize it, do they?
No, they don't. And you know that Syria, I'm just getting the chills right now. Syria was one of the last countries that had independence from the International Monetary Fund, right? It was Iran, Syria, and Cuba that were the last countries to kind of fall to the IMF.
North Korea.
North Korea, thank you. And Syria was the last one to fall, but that is also really aligned with the Rift Zone, and it actually has some of the very earliest Sumerian kind of extraterrestrial underground artifacts there. And I'm sure that it is because of those sites and because of the other, political stuff that country fell first, because it's actually. We can talk about Cuba. I spent a heap of time in Cuba. I've gone to Cuba 3 times now and done some serious energy work there, because that's the closest place that you can get to the fire crystal of Atlantis, because that's still actually an artifact underneath the ocean and they can't find it. And I guarantee you that's why they didn't close Guantanamo, is because the Guantanamo is not open for any other reason than to look for that fire crystal of Atlantis. And it's really close.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly know with Jordan and Syria, because one of my best friends in London, she studied Arabic and economics, and they'd also gone to Syria and told me about it. But I know that I think even Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler was interested in that area, and before him, First World War, there was a lot of explorers that unexplicably all ended up Russians, Germans, Brits. French, they all headed off to, the Himalayas to sort of look for these magic artifacts, etc.
Well, it's true. Hey, just taking it to a different level. In 1984, I met this guy called Al Billick here in Brisbane. Yeah. Now, Al Billick was one of 2 brothers who were involved in Project Rainbow, which is in 1942, was an American Project Rainbow, which was about getting a destroyer called the Eldridge and making it radar invisibility. In fact, Nikola Tesla was head scientist on the time, but there was a deadline that he had to make, and he realized that there was an issue that was going to happen with the crew. Anyway, so he got the sack, and a guy called Professor Neinheimer took over. And the result is that you probably know it as the Philadelphia experiment. And the 2 Cameron brothers were involved in the project. And when the ship went into radar invisibility, it was really going into a San Andreas fire. And it was like a big electromagnetic storm. And the 2 boys jumped off the ship thinking they're going to be in the Potomac River. In fact, they didn't. They turned up in Montauk Reservation. Now, when I met him, excuse me, here in Brisbane, he spoke about American had overcome time travel. And he went on to give a story about a movie called Final Countdown. And it was about the USS Nimitz, an aircraft carrier that was sent out of Pearl Harbor, and it went into a mysterious magnetic storm and went back to the day before Pearl Harbor. And they had a choice of taking out the whole Japanese Imperial fleet before they attacked Pearl Harbor. That was the quandary. But in fact, what actually happened, they ended up leaving one of the crew, a well-known commander, who then, when time travel came back and brought back the ship to 1982, it turns out that this commander had met up with the Secretary of Defence's secretary, and he was Tideman Industries that actually then assisted in bringing through all the technology from 1982 to 1942. And he then went on, and then that's the movie side of thing, of Final Countdown. He said, well, art imitates life. And he said, it actually happened, but it actually happened in 1929. And there was an anomaly just off Caracas in Venezuela. And the US Navy sent 3 destroyers to find out what was the anomaly on the seabed. And what actually happened was, when the 3 destroyers went across into that particular field of energy, they ended up in 1969. You know, when you talk about the fire crystal, that story that you just put forward reminded me of Al Billick saying those ships went back to 1969, and what actually happened, the Americans, because they understood time travel, were able to give them gyroscopes, and they actually sent them back to 1929. So,
wow.
So you probably realise that the story of Bermuda Triangle, that seems to have now disappeared off the radar, so to speak. It's almost like somewhere along the line they've actually found the anomaly in the crystal that's created that problem. Yeah.
Well, Minnie talks about the Bermuda Triangle as like, you know, the actual portal of Atlantis, where they were sending minerals and different resources up to that moon of Jupiter, where they were reestablishing life for the Temu. I mean, she's got a whole nother story about that Bermuda Triangle, but I will say that one of the land healing points that I was called to do was actually this trinity of women that I was working with. One was my Reiki master. One was another woman who was a Reiki master at the time, who was, you know, a student of my Reiki master. We were doing trade for a while, and we were working as a trinity of women. And I realized when I was going to a conference in Florida that my Reiki master Julian was in Florida, and the other woman was in the going to be in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I just felt like I have to go to Bermuda. We have to do this triangle of healing around this area of land, or this area of the ocean. And so made that happen. I mean, yeah, another story, another time. I mean, there's so many, you know.
Where did you get the funds to just go to Bermuda?
Well, so that was the thing.
That's
Well,
amazing.
listen, okay, so maybe I need to share. I didn't have the funds really to go to Bermuda. I really stretched myself, but I knew I had to go, so I paid for it, right? And I had the money to go to this conference, and it was only like another, I don't know, $250 or something to like go to Bermuda. I got a cheap Airbnb. I got a little motor scooter running on the island, and I was supposed to fly back through. I flew to New York to fly to Bermuda, right? And I was supposed to just fly directly. No, I was going to fly back New York, Florida, and then I was catching my flight back to San Francisco. Well, I ended up being there overnight, just one night, to do this work, and I went to the beach, did my little ceremony thing. This guy came up to me, this elder, maybe in his 60s, early 70s. He had like a little bandage around his knee, but I could see he was doing something kind of like Qigong near the rock, near the ocean. And he saw what I was doing, and he came up to me and said, I see what you're doing, and I really want to just share something with you. And I said, sure. And he starts speaking to me in prose. Like, just starts off his tongue, just rhyming, and tells me this beautiful poem. And I just felt like in my heart, like this was a sage from a past life. Like I knew him. anyways, I said, well, I'd love for you to sit down. I see your knee is hurt. I'd love to give you some Reiki on your knee. So I sit and I start giving him Reiki. And then he tells me about his life. He was a marathon runner on Bermuda, from Bermuda. And, now he's just living his life out. And half the time he spends in Florida and half the time he spends here. And he'd love for me to spend the night. And I said, well, no, I have to catch my flight. And so I get off on my motorbike, but he gives me his phone number. Well, I don't know where, talk about time travel. I mean, I thought I was tracking the time perfectly. I was doing all these little activations along the island edge. I thought I was in perfect time. I drop the scooter off. I get to the airport. The counter's closed.
Oh.
There are no more flights leaving Bermuda. I am terrified because I'm like, I'm going to miss my connecting flight to San Francisco. There's no way I'm going to make it. I call this guy. I'm in tears. I said, I can't believe I'm even having to use your number. He said, no problem. He picks me up from the airport, takes me over to his little village area, shows me all around, tells everybody I'm his daughter, cooks me a meal that night, puts the pull-out bed. We tell stories all night long, and he takes me to the airport in the morning. And I was crying because I didn't have money to buy another plane ticket, right? And he's like, don't worry about it. Buys me the plane ticket for the morning so I can go straight to Florida instead of having to do the connecting flight in New York, which actually makes the triangle. Instead of me going up to New York and to Bermuda and going back through New York and Florida, I actually create the triangle there. And I was within an hour of my connecting flight to San Francisco. I get back to San Francisco. He gives me his address. He gives me his Florida address. And I was like, I have to thank this man. I can't believe I was just in tears with the generosity. I hadn't had somebody given me anything like that, just out of, just kindness, ever really. It was such a healing moment for me. And it was just so generous. And he's, an islander. And I couldn't believe it. So anyways, I get him this very sweet card and package, and I send it. And about a month later, I get it returned to sender. This address doesn't exist.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Are you serious?
Yep.
Wow. That's
never
so
talked to him again.
Time travel.
Mm-hmm.
He was there.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So
I have another.
No, wait.
Oh, God.
Because Jeff's just doing the pictures and I'm following this. So you're a bit like like when you drop the pin on Google. So I figure whoever is behind Atlantis is like, Melanie is like a walking pin.
I have
wherever she is.
I would
The
say.
energy follows.
Oh, I have a map. I have about.
They shift time a bit. So
I'm
she
getting up to
slides back into the track.
I'm getting up to about 100 major acupuncture points that I've put on the grid so far, at least.
And what does the pattern? Is there a pattern, or is it just like?
Actually, you can see a pattern where I've done, like, if you look at the whole globe, you can almost see how I did North America. I cut across Europe and the Middle East, and I go to Australia. It's this big diagonal of what I've done, but I have done some of Central and South America just at the tip here. But yeah, it's this big band that goes from, California. If you go down to Peru, you go across. Well,
Brazil.
I haven't done Brazil,
Okay,
but I did Oman, Egypt. I did a lot of Europe. And then if you go across, I did some in India and Indonesia. That's where the diagonal comes in. If you look at Europe, Middle East, Australia, that's a really strong line that I've done of a lot of different points. But then there's a whole heap of stuff I've done in North America, because obviously, like, it's my homeland. But man, one of the places I love to go, one of the energy centers that I think is actually emerging, and we're going to see a huge resurgence, like a real, unfolding of new earth energy coming out of Moscow. I really believe that. People are really like, anti-Russia in the United States, or they feel it's, but I think that Moscow is going to just unbelievably have this just heart-opening offering for the world. I think there's going to find a pathway for transcendence.
Well, I actually we had her on the show, Ray, Lithuanian that I worked with in Vietnam. And the Siberian shamans, the Mongolian shamans, they've got an unbroken lineage tradition. just like the indigenous ones here.
Yeah.
So I think there's some resources to be tapped in to unfold.
Mm.
So this is amazing. So if people are interested, you teach this. I know you used to take, before COVID, you used to take people to Egypt and organize travels, trips, so that people could go to sacred places with you.
Well,
Tell us
I
more
was,
how people can connect with you or train with you.
yeah, I was just beginning that work in 2020. I had like a 7 chakra world tour planned, and I had these sacred, 13-day tours planned, and everything really just got put on pause. So that's been great. As you both know, I've been working with Auntie Minnie Mace and learning a little bit more about this transmissions from the Golden Age of Egypt, and so I've been taking that and integrating that. I was just launching a Mayan calendar activation series through my website before the solstice happened. And since then, I've taken a pause on that. So all these stuffs are, I really want to get back into teaching and offering, but right now it's still all in development. So if you do go to my website, I think there's only a few links that work. Like you could work with me one-on-one, or there may be some, I have to look at it right now, but I haven't done work on my website in a while. So it's all a little bit on pause until something opens up and my heart feels like it's time to offer something. But right now I'm helping many develop those books on the Raha Arkate. Mm.
And I see for your Facebook group, you call it Star Body Earth. What's the significance of that?
Yeah, just that I think we all are, we're all coming from our source place, wherever that is, whatever our pathway is from above. So that's the essence of the beginning, and then having that essence actually come and be embodied, and actually linking it into the earth. That to me is the spirit path, is actually recognizing our higher level consciousness, what we have access to in that realm, because I actually think everyone has a different level of dimensional knowing that they can bring in. So there's that. How do we embody it? And then how do we actually walk it on the planet? How do we actually give it back to the planet? That's my offering.
They say that, it's time for humanity to come back to, being carers and guardians of the land, and, listening to you, being of service and just setting out, wholeheartedly to be wherever synchronicity takes you, and then making time in places that could be deemed quite dangerous for women on their own. Very, kudos to you. I personally don't actually travel on my own if I can avoid it. I tend to play safe. So that's a big thing that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I forget about that being a thing. Well, I've just had too many experiences where I get protection, and I get guidance. People actually just show up and they're like, "Oh, come here," and I listen and I feel, oh yeah, I actually feel like I can trust them. And
yeah, I guess it's by being vulnerable and exposed, that establishes the invite for people to connect with you and protect you, or guide you if that's or host you if that's needed. Whereas when we generally travel independently and we just organize where we're going to go, we sort of close off all those avenues. And it's traditional, and it's certainly in a lot of the traditional cultures, it's especially with the nomads, it's imperative that they welcome any stranger that's in their country for exactly that reason. They've turned up.
I think you have to know your own boundaries, right? That's a really important part of it. If I didn't know my own boundaries, I couldn't be open and curious, right? If I didn't know how to not only know my own boundaries, but be able to say them and speak them when I don't feel comfortable, then I wouldn't be able to say yes when I do feel comfortable. So for anybody who's interested in doing some of this work, I think that's the first step. It's like being able to speak your truth and saying, no, I don't feel comfortable with that. That's the first step.
Wonderful.
Hey, there's a lady I know called Vicky Cunningham who's been sending some of comments up there. Vicky's a bit like you. She's only like, I think I'm gonna have to get on the phone and ring up to Michael Jackson when he does another Lord of the Rings and he needs another Hobbit. So Vicky's about 4'9", 4'10". She's gonna punch me out. She's gonna step out and punch me out. Beautiful human being. She lives on the north shore of Sydney. She's a nurse. She travels quite extensively around the world and takes on assignments. Yeah, she has a great love for exactly what you're doing. Yeah. So you've done pretty well here, Melanie, to enlighten other people, and particularly people who have sort of walked that path and realize they themselves have been doing it as a solo journey. And most people would be listening to the show would probably think, it seems really right out there, you know, it's right. Why would you want to do that? And you know, like, and yet some sort of ritual or some sort of most people might think, oh, it's a bit of mumbo jumbo, because I noticed that one of my mates there said, well, you want to try bloody driving on a Wynnum Road at 7 o'clock in the morning as opposed to, you know, come on public transport from Bribey Island. So he's been a cheeky bugger, but we've got diametrically opposed, you know, people who have got some laughter and some humour in seeing things, and you've actually brought it to the light. The question is that what you're doing is no different to all these major cathedrals all around the world, who these guys all get dressed up in all this ritual stuff, and they go and burn their incense and get the swinging things there, and then they get the little boy choir singing soprano stuff, and they do the little baptisms, man. Except it's in a man-made bloody building, isn't it? And yet this whole concept of ritual ceremony has gone through years of time, and it's almost like you're almost like an archaeologist digging up all these different what do I say, pagan religions or very metaphysical traditions, but certainly crystals do play an important part in our own modern world, you know, starting from CB radio and crystal radios to liquid crystals and all our electronics. So, you know, that quartz does hold a piezoelectric current, so it actually stores information. So there's something to be said for all the comments that you've made today. I think it's been quite enlightening. Fair play to you. And I think it's great that you're with Auntie Minnie too.
Oh, well, the biggest thing is I'm listening to you is actually the purpose of all this really, I think, has to do with not just reawakening these sites and these ley lines, but actually clearing the density that's been laid down on the earth, right? And it's through doing this remembering and reconnecting, not only with the land and the minerals, and the elements, but with the actual nature spirits on the land. Because the minute you make a connection with them and give them a little bit of life force energy, or give them some recognition, they go to work, you know. And I know this might bring up a lot of laughter in the comments and whatnot, but there's so many interdimensional beings that want to help out too. And the more you rally those beings, the angelic realms and the dragon realms, and, you know, all these other beings of light that want to support, it's like they need an actual physical embodied vessel to work through in some way.
Yeah. They need the invite and the facilitator and the witness.
Yes.
And the purity of the heart.
Yes.
And if we don't clean up the densities from generations of wars and hate and grabbing property and disrespecting and all, you know, demarcating and defecating and all that, you know, we can sit and meditate, but we're still energetic gunk that has to be cleaned up.
That's right. And Min will say this too. It's like you're either part of the cleaners or you're part of the crew that's being cleaned up. So what are you going to do? Are you going to be part of the cleanup crew, or are you going to be the person that needs to be cleaned up?
Hey, I tell you that the subtle difference here is you brought up Bali before, and I happened to be there in the early 80s or whatever it was. And yeah, those little, what would you call it? Flower, fauna with incense. They always used to be there just after you've got up and went outside. You had these sprayed all over the place. And the thing was that the Balinese conception of their faith was quite interesting, that when the 88 Australians, New Zealanders, and English got killed in the Bali bombings, the Balinese went in there and they did this humongous big blessing and cleansing. And they actually helped those disconnect spirits to move on. The funny thing is that in the Western Christian philosophy, they'll go and build a monument, and like particularly in London, it's just chock-a-block full of bloody heroes of war, and then there's the memory of, say, the 11th of the 11th, when we have Memorial Day in the United States at a different date to the Anzac Day here in Australia and New Zealand. And so there's like a celebration of war and a celebration of those who've gone to war and died. And there was that, in Bali, there was that ceremony taking place year in, year out on the anniversary. And I suppose grief is so real, you don't understand unless you've lost someone. So to go there, just to stand there like they do in World War I at Flanders and watch all those young boys dying on the Eastern or Western Front. I mean, all I'm trying to say here is the Balinese had a different philosophy of let's move on. Let's shift it out, take it on, move it out. And whereas like the Western one is coming back every year to celebrate it, memorialize it, and draw back down those people who've passed over.
The intent is different.
Yeah. It's quite an interesting contrast.
And I will say too, though, when I didn't really want to go to Bali, I wasn't interested actually because of the eat, pray, love situation. I thought it was already too popularized and too much of a spiritual tourist place, right? I knew it was an energy center, but I didn't really care. And it wasn't until my good friend Liz said, well, me and my family are going to be there. We want you to come and visit us for Thanksgiving. And I was coming down from Nepal and I was coming to Australia. So it made sense. Said, okay, I'll come and visit you and your family in Bali because I just absolutely adore that family. But I didn't really care about going. And then when I got there, I understood why. Actually, I think about 10, 15 years ago, there was a level of purity there around the traditions and the religions. And I think there's still that underlying purity. And then I think because of the monetization of all of this spiritual tourism, there has now been a gloss over. And there's some of those practices, like you were saying, Julia, where they make all these little delicate flower arrangements and whatnot. I actually talked to someone there in Bali, a native, who was saying now these women, it's almost like the Joneses, like they have to outdo their neighbor with the offerings, right? So it's like if you don't have this many offerings, you're looked down upon socially, right? Because you couldn't have the crew to make all these offerings in a regular way. And there's this thing happening. And it actually struck me because when I was there, especially in Ubud, I felt a lot of like almost like impish nature spirits running around. Like there's a lot of like real, little almost like there's a lot of nature. There's a lot of spiritual energy for sure, but there's a lot of dark on top of the light. And I was expecting this huge like light force, right? And when I talked to that guy, I was like, oh, that's why. Because there's some people that are giving offerings from a place of, it's a different place. It's a place of, I have to do better than my neighbor with this offering rather than I'm giving offer. So the intention changes. And then what are you calling in? You're calling in a little bit of an impish dark force energy. And I was feeling all sorts of dark. I got to Ubud and I was like, I cannot do this by myself with the level of energy that I have right now. And I went to Flores and I did some underwater exploration over there in that beautiful national park. And then I came back over to Bali and did the activation sites. There's 6 activation sites in Bali, actually. There's 6, and not many people know about that. There's only really 3 that are open to tourism. If you don't actually want to go there, you would never know to go there. So that's one of the places that I'll be doing some earth activation tours around. I only made it to 5. I missed the immortality portal. So I guess it's not time for me yet to be immortal, but another time. I still haven't been in Fuji either. And I know that's one of the immortality sites. So we have that yet to come. There's so much more. I'm only 40. Let's do this. Oh,
Well, Melanie, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been wonderful to have you on the show.
Yeah.
And it's been great to have you, talk about your journey and all the trials and tribulations and your learnings from that. And hopefully, I know there's a lot of people among the listeners who are doing that kind of stuff in their own way. So, hopefully we, just by sharing those stories, we can be strengthened in our resolve to keep on doing that, and that it's not completely crazy, and it does make a difference. I'm sure it does. Next week, we actually do have, Jeff, you're talking about the rituals to help people move on after tragedies and discount. We have Steve Richards, who works with Dreamtime Healing and takes care of exactly that kind of work as well. Less dowsing places, but more dowsing people. Little entities or big entities that they might have picked up and lost. So I hope you that are listening, if you can join us next week, that'd be wonderful. And thank you very much from all of us here at Radio FM 88.
Thank you.
Brilliant, hey. So very good, Mel. Do you like to call Mel, or you just like Melanie?
I like Melanie. I know that everybody shortens everything in Australia.
Mm.
I prefer Melanie.
You don't get called Melody?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, mostly Melanie.
Okay, very good. And your family, how do they see your intrepid individual spirit going out there?
Oh, yeah, my family loves it. My dad doesn't understand me at all, but the rest of my family totally is open, and they know that I'm very heart-centered. He's got a pretty structured analytical mind, so it's hard for him to really grasp what I'm doing.
Oh, you've got that Vulcan mind.
I'm a hybrid. I think that's I can understand both ways.
All right. Well, thank you. You've already signed off, mate. Thank you. Bless you.